The Baltimore Ravens should make Lamar Jackson a Raven for life. We talk about why, talk about how Jackson could impact the Ravens' free agency plans depending on how the situation goes, talking a bit about the Ravens' offensive coordinator position and which could be the most realistic hire out of the candidates interviewed, all coming up next year on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. We are here, as always, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for being here with us today and tuning in, making us your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms, also in video form over on YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Nissan. The only thing more exciting than the big game is the all-new all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. There are only 4 days left. We're at Wednesday here, only 4 days left until the Super Bowl. Are you ready? The Nissan Ariya, the EV for people who love to drive. Learn more at nissanusa.com. We're back. It is a midweek edition here, Wednesday edition of Locked On Ravens, and there are plenty of Ravens storylines to talk about despite Baltimore not being in the Super Bowl. Obviously, it's the Chiefs and the Eagles this year. Hopefully, Baltimore can get there next year, but they do have a lot of work. They have to be done, a lot of questions they have to answer. And one of those questions is Lamar Jackson. Where will Lamar Jackson play in 2023? We've been talking about it extensively here on Locked On Ravens, and other people have been talking about it extensively too. But I do want to dive in today. You know, we heard the phrase Raven for life multiple times from Mark Andrews over the course of this past week. You know, obviously with the Super Bowl going on, they have a lot of media down there. A lot of people are going and interviewing. Mark Andrews has made it clear that he believes Lamar Jackson is a Raven for life. He thinks he loves the organization and he thinks the organization loves him. So we'll talk a bit about why I think that the Ravens should make Lamar Jackson a Raven for life. And Andrew's even saying that he'd give up his paycheck for Lamar. So a bit of teammate love in there. In the second segment, though, we'll dive a bit into how Jackson could actually impact the Ravens free agency in 2023. We've talked about the contract a lot. I'll kind of lightly touch on that because we talked about it so much. But just in terms of personnel, who the Ravens could go after, in terms of actually like who they realistically could go after if the Ravens sign him to an extension, franchise tag, or even if he's not on the team altogether. So we'll talk about that. And then finally, I want to dive a bit into who the most realistic candidate could be for the offensive coordinator position, something that I do want to talk about more extensively on a different show, maybe tomorrow, maybe Friday. But I think there's one candidate that sticks out to me that could follow a similar path to what the Ravens have done with their recent hire, especially Mike Macdonald. So we'll talk about all that today. If you're here with us on YouTube, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn notifications on. We are here 5 days a week. It is daily for us, even in the offseason, 5 days a week, Ravens content, also in audio form, same show, both audio and video. So be sure to follow along Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. So whether you're listening on your way to work or from work or doing whatever you're doing, be sure to follow along and turn notifications on there. So let's talk about why I think Lamar Jackson should be made a Raven for life by the Ravens. And it's kind of stuff that I've talked about over the course of the last couple of weeks, last couple of months. But for me personally, I am still pretty surprised the Ravens and Lamar Jackson haven't been able to agree on a long-term deal yet. I think that, you want to see a bit more playoff success, and he's shown the growth. He's shown growth over the course of his first 5 years. Yes, the injury luck has been pretty bad over the last 2 years. Those injuries haven't been because he's a quote-unquote running quarterback. I know a lot of people want to push that narrative out there and say, well, because he's running, he's getting injured and his play styles is not sustainable. He got injured on passing plays. I mean, he got sacked against Denver. He was in the pocket. He was, running outside the pocket to kind of avoid pressure. He was trying to throw the ball. And the same thing against the Browns when he suffered his injury last season. It wasn't like he was running, he took a big hit or something. These are both lower leg injuries that happened on passing plays. So for me, though, that argument is not something I'm taking into consideration whatsoever right now. What I am taking into consideration is what I have said so many times over the course of this past week, is the fact that Lamar Jackson gives the Ravens their most realistic shot to win. Are the Chiefs going to trade Patrick Mahomes in the next 2 months? If you think Joe Burrow's better than Lamar, is Joe Burrow getting put on a trade block? If you think Jalen Hurts is Jalen Hurts, I don't think the Ravens are a destination for newly retired Tom Brady if he comes back, which I don't even think he is anymore. But I don't think they're a destination for Aaron Rodgers at this point. And some of those things where the Ravens right now, they have a guy who is a franchise quarterback. They know that. He knows that. I think all of us know it too. Lamar is a franchise quarterback, whether it is the Ravens franchise quarterback or whether it's somebody else's franchise quarterback. Another part of this whole thing is the fact that he seemingly does have the locker room in his arms. And I'm not saying that in like a bad, like manipulative way or anything. Like his teammates just love him. And we've talked about that over the course of these last couple of weeks. But as I kind of mentioned at the top, Mark Andrews has gone on a bunch of different shows over the course of the last couple of days and talked about how he believes Lamar Jackson is a Raven for life and that he does love the organization and this and that and the other. And we've heard it even in the end of season press conference, Ronnie Stanley, Calais Campbell, Morgan Moses, et cetera, et cetera. These guys talk about how, it'd be great if Lamar was able to come back and, they want Lamar Jackson back and they hope Lamar Jackson is back. So losing Lamar would be, I think, a pretty big hit to the locker room. Not like it would be unrecoverable or anything, but I think it would be a pretty big blow if the Ravens were to just let Lamar Jackson walk, or the realistic option is trading him if they let him go. But if they trade him and then all of a sudden it's all right, who's the quarterback now? Because a stat I want to point the attention to of everybody is the fact that Lamar Jackson as a starter in the NFL has played 61 games. He started 61 games in the NFL. He has 45-16 as a starter in his career so far. That he's won 74% of his games. That's another way to put it. 73.8. So I'm rounding up. I'm doing a little math. I'm rounding up. 74% of his games he has won as a starter. That number is very hard to come by. It's very hard to find that consistent production. And again, sure, that's regular season. You want to see it in the playoffs a little more. I get it. I understand it. And I agree. The playoff success needs to be better from the Ravens, from Lamar Jackson. I mean, the Ravens haven't gone back to the AFC Championship game since they won the Super Bowl back in 2012, 2013. So that's a different conversation, but it does apply to Lamar and the fact that he has not had the playoff success, or he didn't, at least on his rookie contract, that we saw some of these other guys have, like a Patrick Mahomes who won a Super Bowl, Joe Burrow who got to one, Jalen Hurts who now has gotten to one, et cetera, et cetera. You want to see that, but at the same time, with Lamar, I think that improvement personally is coming. And there have been arguments about, oh, well, if the Ravens let Lamar walk, there wouldn't be really a market because he's asking for too much money and too many guarantees. It's not true. I'm sorry. It's just not true. There would be a line out the door of quarterback needy teams who would love to be in the situation that the Ravens are in right now, having a quarterback that is good enough to warrant a contract like Lamar is going to warrant, whether it is 200, 250, 300, and however much of that is guaranteed. There would be teams who would love to have Lamar Jackson on their team and who would love to have them jumpstart. Lamar Jackson makes a lot of teams who are kind of just like, they're kind of good. They would make that move 100% because Lamar makes that team so much better. And I think for what Lamar has done in the Ravens community, how he has bought into Baltimore, it just feels like to me, if you want to have a shot at winning with this roster right now, at least the most realistic one, and sure, there are other options that could happen, right? The Ravens could hit on a rookie quarterback that takes them to the promised land, or maybe a mid-tier option has a amazing season, but those are much less likely than what you have in a Lamar, who I think, again, has shown enough. Now, is it perfect for Lamar? No, it's not perfect. We saw the deep ball accuracy regress last season, especially, that Cincinnati game I keep going back to where he ended up missing 2 wide open touchdowns in a span of 3 plays. I get that he is not a perfect quarterback. Is he the best quarterback in the league? No, he's not. I get it. But at the same time, he gives you, if you're the Ravens, the best shot to win because you can sign him and figure out the rest from there, especially if it's an extension, which we have talked about. And I'll just briefly touch on the contract here. Franchise tag is that 1-year fully guaranteed deal. That is the hit for Lamar Jackson if he does a 1-year fully guaranteed deal. So it'd be either the 32 or the 45 based off non-exclusive versus exclusive franchise tag. If you sign him to an extension via the Ravens, you're able to free up cap space because you can make that first-year cap hit depending on, again, there are a lot of language stuff in there like bonuses, guarantees, outs, and whatever. But you can make that cap hit $10 million, $12 million, $15 million, and still have enough cap room. The Ravens right now are slated right around 27, 28 to go and get a DeAndre Hopkins or go get a number 2 corner next to Marlon Humphrey. So I do think that it is within the Ravens' best interest to make Lamar Jackson a Raven for life. You've had 5 years of him in Baltimore. You understand the strengths, the weaknesses, what he can improve on, what he's good at. And plus, he has shown it on the field time and time again. There is not going to be another Lamar Jackson. He is that polarizing, that electric. I mean, you can make the comparisons to Michael Vick all you want to, but Lamar is just in a category of his own. And to find another franchise quarterback, it is not easy. All the years of mediocrity the Ravens had at quarterback, going back to the start of their franchise. I mean, the Bullies of Baltimore documented it with Tony Banks and Trent Dilfer. No disrespect to those guys or any of the other ones, but Lamar is just in a different category. You have an opportunity to make a franchise quarterback the quarterback of your team for a very long time, hopefully a Raven for life, as Mark Andrews said. So for me, I do think it is within Baltimore's best interest to make Lamar Jackson a Raven for life. But coming up in our second segment, we'll be diving a bit into how the Lamar situation could impact free agency a little bit, talking about targets with and without Lamar and more. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a lot to dive into on Locked On Ravens. But first, this episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. And you've heard me talk about this mobile game app, and I can't tell you how much fun I had competing against my fellow Locked On NFL host. Now, Chris Carter, Locked On Steelers, was a Locked On NFL champion. I did not win, even though I really did want to. But now it's your turn to compete, but more on that later. If you ever dreamed of becoming an NFL general manager and managing your football franchise, your dream can come true, and this game is definitely for you. You'll manage every strategic aspect of your team, play through seasons, and lead your team to glory trying to build a dynasty. Ultimate Football GM, you're responsible for controlling the destiny of your franchise by hiring the right coaches and coordinators, trading players, navigating your franchise through free agency and the draft, and all the ups and downs of a season. And it really is an immersive experience. You get to do so many different things, so many different decisions that can lead you to glory, and you can compete with your friends or your family and all this in a challenging, realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM is completely free and playable offline, so you can play on the go as you want and when you want to. We've created a Locked On League for you to compete against Locked On fans all over the world. Can you be the ultimate Locked On Football GM? Choose the Locked On League in the app to join. Can you create a football dynasty? Locked On Ravens listeners, 100% free boost of their franchise when using promo code Locked On in all caps in the game store. That's Locked On in all caps. Make sure to check it out today. Download the game, visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM, start your dynasty today. We return here. It's our second segment of Locked On Ravens here on Wednesday. Kevin Ostreicher still here with you, and thank you so much for being here with us, making us your first listen on Locked On Ravens. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel on YouTube, follow along in audio form, the whole 9 yards. Also, be sure to make your second listen Locked On NFL, where I host a Monday show over there. So we talk Super Bowl, we talk Sean Payton, Tom Brady, and so much more over there. But in this second segment, I do want to continue the Lamar Jackson conversation and talk about how his status with the team could impact the Ravens free agency. And again, this is something I do want to talk about more on a different show, maybe next week. Hopefully we'll have a resolution by next week, but I'm just kind of taking it a day as it comes, because we haven't heard a bunch of substantive stuff, and it's just a credit, I guess, to how the Ravens and Lamar have kept everything quiet. Although we've heard plenty of reports, plenty of interesting reports that I don't necessarily take at full face value. But regardless, with Lamar and what he brings to the table as a quarterback, as we talked about in the first segment, he deserves to be surrounded by weapons all across the board. Now, the Ravens made it a priority for them to go out there and revamp their offensive line. I think it all starts up front for an offense. I think that was a solid plan, but the issue was that the Ravens completely neglected the wide receiver position and ended up deciding to trust their young guys, which, again, I don't think was wrong in principle, but the issue was that if Bateman or Duvernay goes down, or Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, if only one of them goes down, you're in a heap of trouble. Baltimore lost both. They had to rely on a 36-year-old Deshaun Jackson and then Sammy Watkins, who they placed a waiver claim for. The number one wideout at the end of the year was Demarcus Robinson, who you'd like to have maybe more as a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 instead of wide receiver 1. So for me, I think this offseason, if Lamar is to stay, well, honestly, both. If he stays, if he leaves, the Ravens need to address wide receiver. Now, if he stays and the Ravens reach that extension, let's say the cap number is $15 million, and that's what that's the only move they've made so far. The Ravens, $27-28 million in cap space right now. You add in that first year $50 million cap hit, $15 million cap hit for Lamar Jackson. I think that it gives them a little room, because you can restructure a couple of guys. There are a couple of cap casualties. I mentioned Kevin Zeitler and Gus Edwards. I personally don't think that those two should be cap casualties. I think Zeitler gives you a lot because look, with cap casualties, kind of a side tangent, with cap casualties, every guy that you let go, a hole opens up on your roster. The Ravens would have a massive hole at right guard if they were to let go of Kevin Zeitler, someone who I personally think has been a Pro Bowl snub for the past 2 seasons. So while you can create, I think it's $7 million with the release of Zeitler, he just means too much to me, to the team, to just say, yeah, we're going to let you go. Maybe there's a restructure. Maybe they let him go and bring him back on like a handshake deal. But I just think to outright let him go and let him leave would be a mistake. I mean, you can even talk about that with Gus Edwards. Calais Campbell, I think, saves an extra $7 million if he's let go. So those are the types of options that you got to consider. But if the Ravens have that $15 million cap hit for Lamar, shaves off that number, gives them about $12, $13 million in cap space. You can restructure a couple guys. You can go here and there. And I think you can open up a decent amount with that. So that could mean a DeAndre Hopkins. It could mean a Mike Evans or a Chris Godwin, as we talked about. It could mean the free agent market. Now, Allen Lazard is demanding a lot of money. I would not personally sign Allen Lazard at the price that he appears to be going for right now, or what his market value is expected to be. Well, I think it was like 15 to $18 million or something in that range per season. I'm not investing that. I would be okay with Juju Smith-Schuster. I would be all right with DJ Chark. But the thing with those guys is they're not that stud top 10 wide receiver one that so many people have wanted for so many years. That would be getting a DeAndre Hopkins. That would be getting a Mike Evans or a Chris Godwin. Pipe dream would be T. Higgins, although, first of all, I don't think the Ravens would have enough to pay him the money that he wants. Second of all, I don't think Cincinnati's trading him to Baltimore. So I think that's off the table. But it gives the Ravens options. Like, just because Lamar signs an extension, and it might look huge on paper. If it's 5 years, 250, 5 years, 300, it might look big on paper, but you can manipulate that cap. And as I've talked about with the cap hits, Marcus Williams is making $7.4 million, right around $7-8 million this season in a cap hit. Roquan Smith just signed a 5-year, $100 million contract. His cap hit's $9 million this season. So while these other cap hits, such as Ronnie Stanley, Marlon Humphrey, and Mark Andrews, those are up there. Those are their top 3 cap hits in terms of big contracts that have big extensions. You have other guys run alongside it with lower first, second-year cap hits. And then as those big contracts start to come off the books, those other big contracts take their place, and you just rinse and repeat the whole situation. Now, if Lamar wasn't to be with the Ravens in 2023 and, they go with a rookie, let's say. They sign him to a rookie contract. They have 4 years, maybe the 5th-year option, depending on, whether he's a first-rounder or not. It gives the Ravens more flexibility in terms of what they can do. I mean, you don't have that first-year cap hit for Lamar, so if you take let's just say the $15 million off the books, you can go get a DeAndre Hopkins who has a $19 million base salary. You can probably sign a number 2 corner next to Marlon Humphrey, and you can just hope that the rookie quarterback pans out and can help the Ravens go to where they want to go. But is the drop-off of not having a Lamar, and it's a question that I think people have different answers to, is the drop-off from going from Lamar to a rookie quarterback so significant that even with a much, I don't know if I want to say much more talented roster built around a rookie, because I think you can still build a very talented roster around Lamar. Now, you can't keep everybody, and that's the same whether you had Lamar or a rookie quarterback. We saw it with Za'Darius Smith and Matthew Judon and some of these other guys who have left. It doesn't look like the Ravens are going to be able to keep Ben Powers. Does that avenue open up if the Ravens don't keep Lamar? Is that worth it? So there are so many options, and part of it also is who wants to come play in Baltimore with versus without Lamar. Marlon Humphrey obviously tweeted out, a fan asked him if he was recruiting at the Pro Bowl, and he said, every time I try, I'm asked with the question of, are you guys going to re-sign Lamar? And it's a valid question. Juju Smith-Schuster went on I think it was the Michael Irvin podcast a couple years ago when he was deciding where to go, and his top 3 teams were the Steelers, the Chiefs, and the Ravens. He ended up going back to the Steelers on a 1-year deal that year, and said that he would love to play with Lamar, but the way the Ravens offense was balanced out in terms of run versus pass, it just wasn't the right fit for him. So I think Lamar, people I do really believe want to play with Lamar Jackson. I don't think that's an issue, but it's the stuff I've talked about with Calais Campbell and with Justin Houston. If you're a veteran and you're looking for one more shot to win, like just one more year, this is it. I think that would probably be the case with Calais Campbell and maybe even Justin Houston. Would you want to come back to a team, or would you want to go to a team for any veteran that has Lamar as the quarterback that gives you a pretty good shot to win now? Or would you want to go back to the Ravens with a rookie and kind of roll the dice. I don't know if Calais Campbell or Justin Houston will come back. I probably doubt it that both guys will want to come back to Baltimore if the Ravens want to move on from Lamar. So I think it also impacts who would want to come play in Baltimore. I'm not saying that no one would and everyone would just be, no, Lamar's not there. I'm not coming. I'm not doing it. I don't think it'd be that crazy, but I think it does have some impact on it. So we'll see what ends up happening there. Again, it's a very fluid situation, hopefully resolved sooner rather than later. But coming up in our final segment, we'll be diving into who the most realistic candidate for the Ravens offensive coordinator position could be based off of reported interviews so far. So be sure to stay tuned. Still lots to dive into on the show. But first, this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, and I am still undefeated in fantasy basketball. Don't worry, I'm trying to make my way to 17-0 this week. But if you want a different twist on fantasy, be sure to check out Prize Picks. Prize Picks is super easy to play. They have a ton of games and formats, and you can have a ton of current entries. And how it works is you pick 2 to 6 players, and if they will go score more or less in their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch, including the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, college basketball, and so much more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. Is that easy? They have safe and fast withdrawals and they're currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a $100 deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. You deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. And this episode is brought to you by Built Bar. And if you're looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories, then you have to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know for me, my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. And if you're like me, where you want to eat healthier but don't want to compromise the taste, then I've got just the thing for you in Built. And with Built, healthy is actually tasty, and they're so delicious, you won't even think they're good for you because they are that good and that tasty. It's perfect for your New Year's resolution that we're about month and some change into right now. And what makes Built Bar so good is, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. And they only have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. Now you don't even have to worry about getting a box, because for years we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box, cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. And if you're close to a Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with hit flavors such as brownie batter and churro. Get your hands on some Built Bars. You'll thank me later. We are back here, our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you on Wednesday. And we're not going to be diving into the offensive coordinator situation for the Ravens. Again, stop if you heard that one before. We've talked about it extensively on this show. And I've been thinking about it, and based off of all the candidates that have been reported on and we've heard about, I think I've kind of honed in on the one who seems the most realistic to me in terms of what the path could be. And if the Ravens want to follow pretty much the exact same path they followed in 2022 in that offseason when they hired Mike Macdonald. And that is Bobby Engram, the offensive coordinator over at Wisconsin. Now, if you're thinking, oh, that name sounds a bit familiar, you would be correct. And the reason it is so close to Mike Macdonald is because Engram was with the organization, or the Ravens organization, for many years, from 2014 to 2021. And then he went to Wisconsin last year to become their offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. Now, for Mike Macdonald, he was with the organization for many, many years, a bunch of different roles. He left for Michigan to become their defensive coordinator and then came back to the Ravens and now is their defensive coordinator. So maybe it's another internal / external hire. Where is it really external because he was with the Ravens? Is it really, technically, if you want to be technical about it, it is external because he's not within the organization right now, if that were to be the hire. But I don't know. It just, if they want to follow that path, and the Ravens they've been somewhat consistent in terms of they like their guys, they like their systems, they like to have people who have familiarity with what they want to do on both sides of the ball, well, all 3 phases, including special teams. To me, it just feels like if I had to put money somewhere, if I was a betting man, is the saying, I guess it would be Bobby Engram. I don't think it's a horrible choice. Like, again, if it goes like Mike Macdonald, maybe a couple weeks to settle in, and then an offense that I think is a lot better, I think it would be very interesting. I mean, he was the Ravens wide receiver coach from 2014 to 2018, then moved over to be the tight ends coach from 2019 to 2021. So has experience working with multiple position groups across the Ravens organization, plus the fact that he actually started his professional coaching career as a San Francisco offensive assistant in 2011. Now, he was a wide receiver. He was an NFL wide receiver. He was, I think, most known for his time in Seattle. He was actually a second-round pick in 1996 by the Chicago Bears and had 6 touchdowns his rookie season. And he actually had a Super Bowl appearance. He had that 2005 Super Bowl appearance with the Seahawks when they played the Steelers. And he was actually named to the Seahawks 35th anniversary team in 2011. So a nice little thing there. But he retired in 2011 and immediately became an assistant. So he's been in football for a long time. No breaks in between there. I think a very bright offensive mind. And I think for Wisconsin, the Ravens have been linked to a couple of Wisconsin. I mean, Bobby Ingram, the offensive coordinator, I know also former Raven Jim Leonard has been someone who, is he going to be the defensive coordinator for the Ravens? Is that an option? Could he come on the Ravens as an assistant on their staff? So the Ravens, they like their Wisconsin guys. Kevin Zeitler, a Wisconsin guy. So got to keep that in mind as well. I think for what the Ravens have, though, they've interviewed a lot of guys, no stone unturned mentality, which I think is the right decision. Again, the Matt McDonald decision by the Ravens came pretty early on. I think it was only like a week between the Martindale parting of ways and the McDonald hire. This has been a lot longer. Apparently, Eric Bieniemy, it doesn't look like he's going to be looking for a lateral move. And I know there have been those questions. We talked about it on yesterday's show. And if you haven't checked out yesterday's show, we do a rookie review, rookie grades with Spencer Schultz. So be sure to check that out. But it doesn't seem like Bieniemy is an option for them anymore. Who I think was my top choice, Frank Reich, off the table. He's now the head coach in Carolina. Also, guys like Kellen Moore, who's now the offensive coordinator in Los Angeles. He was on the market for maybe 24 hours. I know there was like 12 minutes he was on the market because he was scooped up that fast. But now it's guys like Dave Canales and Brian Angelicchio and Ingram himself. We've seen those names, and there have been the reports of Byron Leftwich and Todd Monken. So I think that for me, if I had to put like 3 finalists, just gut feeling, no like inside information, just gut feeling from me, 3 finalists, I'd probably say Bobby Ingram, Todd Monken, and Dave Canales. Those are probably the 3 guys that I would put is my finalist. But we'll see. Again, it's a bunch of these will sees for the Ravens right now because, as we've talked about before, whichever domino falls first does have an impact on the other domino, whether it is Lamar Jackson or the offensive coordinator situation. And since both have impacts on the other, what if an offensive coordinator comes in without a guarantee of a Lamar Jackson as their quarterback? What if Lamar comes back and the offensive system isn't known? So it's a bunch of waiting and seeing and just, checking your watch every 5 minutes, checking your phone every 5 minutes about just when is something going to drop for the Ravens, because offensive coordinator positions are starting to come off the board. But the Ravens, as we all know, they do stuff on their own timeline. And when it happens is when it will be for the Ravens. So I think Ingram for me is the most realistic candidate, but we will see what happens at the end of the day in that search. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in today. When we get back here tomorrow, it is more Ravens talk from us. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And I will see you right back here tomorrow.